Success Blueprint Episode 2. Welcome to our podcast, Balancing Work and Personal Life. Join us today as we dive deep into the strategies, insights, and stories that will help you, each one of you, navigate the delicate dance of juggling between your career ambitions and personal well-being. This afternoon and today, guys, we will be joined by one of the success coaches of TUA and an expert on this field. And just a brief background as well, she has been into these marketing consultancy and content creation spanning over a decade. And recently, she has transitioned into a well-being and career coaching, which is really she's enjoying it very well, and she's very passionate as well in helping individuals, especially students, and to just to navigate their path to success whilst prioritizing their holistic well-being. Let's hear it from and welcome, of course, none other than Lauren Kress. Hello, Lauren.
Hi, Lee. How's it going?
I'm good, thank you. Nice to see you, and thank you so much for your time today as well. Appreciate your time, and this is a very exciting topic: balancing work and personal life. Right? Are you excited?
I'm always excited to
I
have
love that.
a live chat.
And congratulations as well that you have transitioned into the career and well-being coaching, and now being a success coach of TUA. Of course, we need your expertise and your, experiences, and also sharing all the strategies that we need as well to be more successful in what we do, and especially the students right now at TUA as well. Are you ready to rock and roll? Let's start about rolling.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Beautiful. Now, a lot of people are juggling, or maybe overwhelmed with a lot of things on their plate at this time. And let's start off with, what are some effective strategies for achieving a healthy work-life balance?
Okay. Well, that's a big question, right? And I think there's lots of different angles into this. One of the ways I like to think about work-life balance, I often compare it to, the way I come into it, and I generally talk about it, is in relation to stress and burnout, because I think for most of us, what happens is that, we kind of pile on a little bit too much onto ourselves, if that makes sense. So I kind of have a joke when I'm giving presentations, where I say, like, I've got a really simple solution to, gaining work-life balance, preventing burnout, recovering from burnout. And I'm like, just stop taking on too much. And I'm like, that's like, seems kind of really obvious, but the question really is then, why do we take on so much? And I think there are lots of answers to this for different people, but that's where I think a lot of this starts, is actually thinking about times where, why did I say yes when I knew I already had too much on my plate? Why did I agree to something? And there's lots of different motivations for taking on too much. Some of them can be practical. Some of them can be things like, financial. I have to work an extra job because I just don't have enough income. Some of them have to be, some of them could be, also, though, a little bit more emotional. And that's where a lot of them, I think, especially for us here in Australia, New Zealand, I think for a lot of us, really, when it comes down to it, a lot of this is like fear-driven. It's emotionally driven. So I'm scared about what's going to happen if I say no. What will people think of me? Like, feeling shame, feeling guilt, feeling a sense of I'm not good enough if I don't do this. So I think, really, I know that's not answering the question in terms of strategy, but I really like to pair things right back to like simple questions. So thinking about, when was the time I took on too much? And also, when was the time where you had a really good work-life balance, the work-life balance you wanted? That can look different for different people. Some people might be like, I'm working 80 hours a week, but I love my job, and that is my version of work-life balance. For other people, it might be a 20-hour part-time job. They might be caring for someone else. They might have kids, or they might have elderly parents or grandparents that they're looking after. We all have different versions of what that is. So I think it really is asking those questions. When did I take on too much? What happened? Why did I do that? Thinking about sometimes brainstorming what happened for you there, and also the opposite. When did you actually go, no, I can't do that? This is when I had really good work-life balance in the past.
I like that. Start with self-awareness, right? And you discover something. It's a good start, actually. And perfect timing at the start of the year, a lot of people may be starting work very soon. Some are studying as a student as well, or whatever activities they need to achieve for next month or in the coming days. And this could be a good start for them to think about, hey, I need to pause and rediscover myself, reboot, recharge perhaps, and do some self-awareness so that I won't be overwhelmed with a lot of things on my plate, same as what has happened last year. So you think of, it could be a strategy as well, pause and think about it. Thank you so much for that, Laws. Now, how can an individual, for those who are starting in the next few days, all right, whatever they need to start next week or in the coming months, how can an individual prioritize their personal well-being whilst they are still like meeting the demands of their professional lives?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And, I kind of like think about it in terms of a bit of a self-care spectrum. So, if you think about on one end of the self-care spectrum, if we think about, I like to use the analogy of a fire. So it's like your fire is absolutely just getting starved. It doesn't have enough oxygen to keep going. On the other end of the spectrum, you have this bright burning flame that can, that essentially has everything it needs. It's a really well fueled fire. For a lot of us, we're probably more familiar with those two extremes, but there's a lot also in the middle. So looking at things like, am I just kind of, or have I just been, taking in enough fuel to get by? This is in terms of, it could be your spiritual well-being, your emotional well-being, your physical well-being. Also things like, are you making time for yourself? So what's actually happening in terms of your self-care? Do you put aside time each day to take care of yourself? What's your sleep hygiene like? How much time do you get to yourself each day? How much time do you need for yourself each day? And there's also people who kind of, like I said, that fire, you could have a fire that's starting to suffocate. So it's not quite starving yet, but it's starting to just not get the fuel it needs to really burn as brightly as it could be, and the way that we kind of move towards that, that sort of thriving, burning, bright flame is that we need to refuel. So looking at the things that we need, and again, this is my fuel is going to look different to every other person's on the planet. We might have similarities, but it's really, like you said, Lee, the self-awareness piece of what does that look like for me? What are my values? What matters to me? And then how do I make sure that I'm giving myself enough of that? So for some people, it might be they need a lot of social connection. How do they reconnect with friends? For other people, it might be, I need alone time. I need time to just like read for half an hour every night. So I'm not sure if that completely answered your question because these are big questions, but I think that kind of starting to self-assess, get that self-awareness, like you were saying as well, and then look at, okay, where do if I want to be really thriving for myself, like what that looks like for me, what sort of goals do I need to put in place? So that's when, going back to your question, maybe this is a little bit more relevant, going back to your question about how do we prioritize, what do we need to do? It really is about getting down to those core values and going, well, what is important to me in the first place? And then how do I carve out time for that? That's also, I think that's the way that we start to move away from extrinsic motivation. So doing things because other people are telling us we have to do it, we need to do it, that sense of I'm not good enough unless I do this. And we start to move towards intrinsic motivation where we're actually looking at, I'm doing this because this matters to me. And because it matters to me so much, I'm going to start putting some boundaries around it to protect it. I'm going to start actually saying no to things that I can't do because these things are so important to me.
Exactly right. And I agree with you, Laws. And I love that when you said the self-care, self-care is helping you get your self-power back. At the same time, when you're reflecting as well of what your core values, what really matters to you, what's the important thing, what's the most important thing for you today. I always Sometimes I do that if I have lots of things to do. As a nurse myself, we've been trained how to prioritize things, but sometimes at the end of the day, you're just human being, and when you juggle things and everything is important, but you have to ask yourself what is the most important thing to you right now, and you
Mm.
know exactly where you're heading at, and you won't be overwhelmed, and it's all organized at the end of the day. And thank you so much for that loss. Great job. I mean, like, at the moment, a lot of people are really like thinking of like, maybe I am not really good enough in this one. Maybe I'm not ready. There's always that negative self-talk. And we have also mentioned this during a previous podcast, that self-talk can either undermine you or empower you. So you have to start with a great mindset at the same time, so that you have a good core belief and a good self-talk. Thank you so much for that, loss. Amazing. We're not yet finished. We can talk all day long, right?
We probably could. We probably could.
I know. Thanks for that. Now, having said that, I just thought,
Mm.
are there any specific techniques or exercises that can help any individual achieve a better or effective well balance between work
Mm.
and personal lives?
Mm. Yeah, it's look, there's a lot, and again, it does come back to where that person is. So I'm going to like generalize and make some assumptions, because it's sort of, you need to tailor it to yourself, right? And I think, us as coaches, it's not so much about giving people advice. I would never advise someone. I just say, like, here's some tools that may be helpful for
Exactly.
you for where you're at. So I think, a big part of this is working out what's going to be that like sort of key first step for you. So we talked a little bit about, looking at your values and your beliefs and what's important to you. And I would call that sort of like step one, discovery, right? So one thing I talk about in my private practice is like the dial in process, and D stands for discovery. So we've got to discover first. Step two, and that's really around what you were asking me, I think that Lee just then, is around initiate. So, it's sort of like you got to walk before you can run. I think sometimes what happens, people get really inspired and really motivated, which is awesome. But then it's like, okay, like before you go sign up to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, maybe let's just get you walking for 15 minutes a day, taking that time for yourself. So I think
That'd
it's
be
looking
great.
at what are those sort of key, more urgent areas. Where are the sort of almost like the emergency things for you. So is it your sleep? Are you not getting enough sleep? For me, and I think this is common for a lot of people, this could be having a health background, so I studied physiology, and then I did I've done my Cert 4 in fitness as well. So I think for a lot of us, starting with the physical can be a really, really important thing. And again, that's going to look different for different people. So that could mean, for some people, it could literally mean just being able to get 8 hours of sleep a night, and that's where they start. For other people, it might be like, yeah, I'm getting good sleep, I've got nutrition, but I'm not getting to the gym. So for them, it might be like, all right, like getting a few exercise sessions in a week to just really give you more energy, could be a really good starting place. And then for other people, it might be something completely different. So it might be that really for them, they're looking more for, they need some more emotional support. They've had a crisis happen. They've had something happen with their family, with their friends, with their study, with their work, whatever it is, with, moving countries, with big changes, big things happening. So for them, it could be very, very different. That could be about reaching out to the right person to get some help. So that could be coaching, it could be counseling, finding the right resources to really support you with where you're at. But again, it all kind of comes back to first going, okay, where am I at? And then, where do I want to be? And what's the first step? So like you said, Lee, as well, okay, like I don't have to do everything, but what's the one thing, the one thing I can do?
Yeah, that's right. And exactly, I agree with you. And I believe that when you are trying to redivert the possible stress, let's say you go for a walk, if you need some sleep, you go for a sleep, that's part of the self-care, isn't it? Right.
Mm.
And some they actually like listen to music. I listen to music as well. So if I feel like I'm so busy and I've got lots of tasks and lots of due dates, assessment, or anything, or any students that are watching right now, you can sympathize and empathize in this. Sometimes there is one thing, even for a few seconds, or even as you had said, exercise, go to the gym, or or walk or run, and that would redivert your neurons as well in your brain, and like giving you that boost kind of feeling that, hey, you know what, after that 10 minutes walk or 10 minutes exercise or listening to music, I'm back on track and I'm recharged again. I can do this. I know what to do. I know what's important to me right now. So yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Laws. And for those who are watching this recorded, you can also send us a question and we can answer that, and just type it in on the comment section below as well. Thank you for that, Laws. Now, speaking of your diversified experience, right, from the marketing to the content creation, the physio health kind of thing, and now doing the coaching, can you share some more practical tips, maybe your experience or maybe the people that you've coached as well, that for setting boundaries
Mm.
between work and personal life, especially for those who are going to start their new career right now, transitioning to whatever it is. If you're a student, having a new investment, having a new business, they'll be watching right now. Any practical tips that you can share?
Yeah, so I think first it's probably actually understanding what a healthy boundary looks like, because I think for a lot of us, and myself included, I wasn't brought up with healthy boundaries modeled to me, and that's not to say anything bad about my parents. It's just that that's a reality for a lot of us. They didn't have the tools that we have now and that we're continuing to learn. Like, I think humans are constantly evolving. We always hope it's in a positive direction, but so I think that we really need to actually understand what a healthy boundary looks like. And I think for a lot of us, when we think about boundaries, it could be either, well, it's like, oh, that's just saying no when you don't want to do something, and that's not quite what a healthy boundary is. Or we could also be thinking that, oh, we have to make sure everyone else is happy. I think we're more familiar with that idea of, oh, okay, we don't want to just say yes to everything. There's that being something that's not a healthy boundary. But, honestly, this sounds funny, but if I'm like not sure about something, or even like what these keywords are, I literally look it up on ChatGPT as a starting place. And that's not to say it doesn't have biases and issues, but sometimes that can actually be a really helpful starting place to be like, what does that even
Oh,
look like? And I've found with terms like that, it's actually really, really helpful. So what is a healthy boundary? A healthy boundary is one where you're looking after your emotional needs, your physical needs, the things that you need. That's not selfish. I think a lot of us mix up healthy boundaries and selfishness together because of values that have been passed on to us or ways that we were conditioned when we were growing up. So I think really understanding it's about supporting your physiological, your spiritual, your emotional needs. Now, in terms of the practical part of putting that into practice, again, it can look different for different people depending on where they're at. I think, and this, I'm sorry that it's not super practical, but I really believe it's true. So I feel like I need to say it, is that I think a lot of this comes back to having a nurtured inner child. So it's about meeting those needs of our inner child, things like having autonomy, having growth, having novelty. There's actually a really, really good book by Dr. Nicole LaPera called How to Meet Yourself. And she talks about this in the book, and it's a workbook. So it's a great resource to kind of work through if you want to understand more about that. But to put it in simple terms, really it goes back to, okay, I've just been asked a question, and this question, or something's been asked of me, and this is making me feel uncomfortable. This is making me feel nervous. This is making me not feel okay. And being able to sit with that and go, okay, maybe I'm actually not okay with what's being asked of me. Maybe I need to push back. When we have a wounded inner child, we're much more likely to agree to something that we don't necessarily want to, because we believe it's the way that we're going to be loved. So for instance, it could be something as simple as, your manager saying, I need you to stay back late tonight to finish XYZ. And your manager might not think anything of it. They might not be thinking they're pushing on your boundaries. You might be like, I absolutely can't tonight, because tonight, I'm meant to be spending time with my kids, or I'm meant to be spending time on studies outside of work, or whatever it is, right? But being able to say there's a different story. If you are someone who has grown up thinking, I really feel loved, I really feel needed when I do something that goes above and beyond, it's really hard for us to say no. So I could say the practical part, which is just being like, don't do something that you don't want to do. being able to say no or being able to negotiate. But it's very hard to have a starting place to negotiate from if we're actually not backing ourselves in the first place and going, it's okay, I am loved and I am good enough, even if I don't show up in this situation, even if I don't do something. So I don't know, maybe Lee, I should throw the practical part of that back to, back to you a little bit as well.
I love your statement there, especially when you've mentioned about inner child trauma, wherein, it's almost is the conflict between saying yes and saying no. If I say yes, I might get this might be taken against me. If I say no, this might be taken against me. So all of those things that has not been addressed a long, long time ago, it becomes fixated as part of the inner child trauma that's not being healed. And thank you for bringing that up, because a lot of people these days are not aware that whatever the psychosocial development, but Eric Erickson has explained, many, many years ago, it actually lingers if the conflict between positive and versus negative. Oh, I can talk all day about this. Anyways, it's one of my favorite subjects when I'm teaching nursing, so I can teach now. Anyways, but yeah, you can actually, any one of you can visit that book of Eric Erickson, or maybe online you can have a look at that psychosocial development. You'll understand your growth from 0 to 65 and above, and why we are actually behaving like this, why we think like this, the way we see things, the way we act, the way we think, it affects the outcome. It's because of the inner child trauma. It could be negative or positive, but again, we have other podcasts for this. It's a very interesting topic actually, and it helps us with our growth mindset once we are all healed and we become more focused on you know focus on more on the positive side in reaching our goals in life. So, again, it all boils down to your mindset at the same time. And thank you for bringing that up. And it's very important for us to understand ourselves. Again, self-care is very important, and learn to say no so that you don't have much on your plate. Otherwise, you won't be able to sleep. And if you can't sleep, you become grumpy. What happens next? And the outcome of your work, it could be, if you're studying, if you have a business or whatever you do, it becomes really the satisfaction is not that worthy. So we make sure that we're aware about this, learn to say no, and be polite and be honest. And speaking of that, I was just thinking, there are people right now, a lot of, or maybe students have just graduated, or who are going to watch this podcast, that is going to start a new career, a new transition. A lot of them might be a bit hesitant to talk to their managers or to their colleagues. How can an individual communicate their needs for work-life balance effectively with their employers and colleagues? Because sometimes if you're new, you feel like, oh, I'm only new, this might be taken against me. But as you have mentioned a while ago, you have to be honest, learn to say no, or you have to speak up at the right time. What do you think, Laws?
Look, it can actually be, firstly, I want to validate that feeling of feeling like you can't say something. And to be honest, unfortunately, there are workplaces where it is very difficult to say something. Fortunately, Lee and I think we're in a very lucky job where we can actually communicate our needs. And when you're in that position, I think it becomes, it becomes more about yourself. Then it becomes, okay, like I need to work out how I can say something, what I can say. And, I think especially when we feel a bit fearful, and this has been my personal experience, is when I felt anxious, and I have a lot of anxiety issues, and I have had more in the past. It's funny because I'm someone who's very comfortable getting up on stage or doing things like this. So people think I'm really confident, but I've had, points of time in my life where I'm like, I can't walk into a shop to return something or to ask them to remove the magnetic tag this is literally an example from my life. I'm too ashamed, even though I was doing nothing wrong, to be able to walk into a shop and say, can you please remove the magnetic tag from like this piece of clothing that I brought? It just made me feel really anxious and uncomfortable. So I just want to share that to say I really, really do know what it feels like and how hard it can be to say something. So I think the first thing is to acknowledge that and just be like, I'm really scared about this. I'm really anxious about this. I do believe that it's okay for me to say or communicate my needs, but for some reason I'm anxious around this, and maybe sitting with that. And then I think the other thing that can happen as a result of that is sometimes maybe we can come across as a little bit, angry or something like that, because we're trying to, communicate ourselves, and we're sort of afraid and we're a bit worried. So I think taking it slow, maybe writing it down first, practicing role playing with a friend or someone that you trust, and saying, okay, I want to just practice sort of what I want to say. So let's say, for instance, you're in a part-time job and you've been working 4 days a week, but you no longer can work 4 days. Maybe you need to do 3 days. But maybe this part-time job, let's say it's a cafe or something, you know that they're like, right now, summer, it's like they're under the pump. They really need you. You're in a place that's really busy. They don't have anyone else. So you're thinking about their needs, but maybe you're not thinking about your needs. So something maybe to think about saying is just giving you a heads up, like, look, it's coming back to, say, for instance, you're studying. It's coming back to my new trimester or semester at university. I'm going to need to have a bit more time to myself just to be able to complete my studies. It's a few weeks away, so I can still do my 4 days for now, but I really need to go down to 3 days in a few weeks. I might be able to occasionally help you out, but I just want to let you know. So kind of approaching it where you're not just dropping it on someone, or you're not being aggressive, like, this is what I need, but I like not to criticize people who do that, because I've literally been in those situations where I'm scared of setting boundaries. I'm scared of communicating something, but really being able to back yourself. In the case, Lee, though, of like, a work environment where maybe there isn't safety, where maybe there isn't that culture of expressing your needs, I think that becomes a much bigger question, maybe something that we couldn't address in this podcast. But I just do want to also say that can be the reality for people as well.
Definitely. And you know what, guys, make sure, like, be authentic, be genuine. I had a podcast with Evan last week, and we talk about being genuine, be authentic, and, connect, and make sure that you're honest with how you feel. Otherwise, you're creating your own stress. Do not self-sabotage. So make sure, talk to the right people, right, Lois? We don't want to create our own stress. And us success coaches, we're only humans, and we make sure as well that we do not create our own stress and self-sabotaging as well, because we want to make sure that we are an inspiration to other people and empower other people at the same time. So please, guys, if you think that you can't juggle, or maybe you're thinking of like you're in a stress at the moment and you need some guidance with your goal setting and everything, talk to us success coaches. There's plenty of us at TUA. Loss is here, myself, Lee, and the rest. You will meet them on this podcast, different episode. I'm sure we're all approachable, right, Loz? We'll always be there as
very
long as,
lovely people.
Yeah, we are very lucky, and we love it. We're so lucky. Anyways, but thank you so much for sharing your thoughts as well, Loz. And to moving forward, I was just thinking, are there any sort of like common misconceptions about work-life balance that you can debunk, if there is?
Well, yeah, I think, the phrase work-life balance in of itself is problematic. Like, I think when people hear that, it's sort of like there's work and then there's everything else, and they are the two things that are important. I think that actually is problematic, because if we're thinking about what life is really full of, work is just a part of our lives, and it's not, yes, we might be spending quite a lot of time, working. Like when we're in full-time work, we're spending maybe a third of our time working, but during our career, like 8 hours, let's say, if you're in full-time work. But yeah, really, it's about like, you've got work, you've got your family, you've got your friends, you've got your hobbies and interests, you've got so much outside of work. So how I like to think of it about is life balance. What does life balance look like for you? And also for, a lot of people here, you're probably studying. We don't talk about work, study, life balance, and study can really take just as much out of you, if not more, than what a job can. The reality is most of us as students have a job that's going to take up a few days of the week, so that we can afford to live in a place like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Auckland, etc. Right? So we need to actually be thinking about it, I think, a little bit more holistically. We need to be thinking about, what does balance in my life look like, and where does work fit into that? Where does study fit into that?
Thank you so much for that, Lois. I agree. And we make sure as well that, we look into reading as well, like inspiring books as well for us to understand better about the work-life balance. There's so many books around like Lois, right? To inspire us and how we can overcome obstacles every day. And of course, our success coaches, we're always here to support you in order for us to help you manage your time to prevent stress at the same time. So make sure that there is a solution to everything, and always remember that there are people like us who are always ready to help you overcome any challenges in life. So thank you so much for that. Now, can you share any inspiring stories or examples perhaps of any individuals you have encountered before who have successfully achieved a healthy work-life balance?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think, I have to sort of have a bit of a cheat answer to this one and say like that what that looks like is different for different people. One of the places I used to work was a media publication called Balance the Grind, and in that publication, we actually explored what that looked like for different people, from people who were famous right down to, and the publication still exists, but right down to people just day in the life. What did that look like for them? What did people's self-care routines look like? And I think that what you realize when you read a lot of those stories is that it looks really different for everyone. Again, there might be different elements for different people, but like I'll use myself as an example. I don't like to use like private clients as as an example. I like to keep their stories private. But for me, I'm like I've been burnt out like numerous times in my life. And I don't have any problem saying that or admitting that. I ran my own business for a long time, and I really, really pushed myself like beyond my sort of limits, And I know that the feeling at the time for me was really about, okay, I'll just do this now and then later it will be okay. Oh, okay, I don't have balance now, but like at some point in the future, I will. But I have to do this now, And it was really, for me, the issue came down to not really having a sense of belonging to myself, not having a really grounded sense of who I was and what I needed and what I wanted. And I think for me, that's why balance and self-care go so hand in hand. Now, my experience, again, it's just sample data, like data of one sample size. My story isn't everyone's story, but I think understanding why am I pushing myself? Why am I trying to go beyond my limits? Will I ever get balance? So when it comes to balance, like now I would say I have a very extremely balanced lifestyle, but for other people that might not look balanced. So for me, I like to get up early. I go to the gym a few times a week. I work on the weekends sometimes. So like I'm a swim teacher on the side. I do a couple of PT sessions with people and career coaching, and I have a full-time job at university as well. I have a partner and I have lots of friends and family, but like for me, that's what balance looks like. For me, balance means my life is full of the things that I want to do. For other people, it might look completely different. I'm like, the fact that I get to write and read every day, I'm like, that's enough balance for me. So it's really, I think, about designing your life the way you want to design it. Yes, it's great to get inspiration. One of the things I really like to talk about, Lee, is the idea of inspired habits. So, we're talking about like, okay, I'm looking at something, I'm like, I really want that. I really like the way, some people talk about things like vision boards or journaling or whatever that looks like for you, getting the inspiration and then understanding, okay, like if I want to complete my degree so I can become a graphic designer, what do I have to do? Well, I have to start doing the things that graphic designers do, right? Like I want to become a photographer. I have to start doing the things that photographers do. I have to start taking photos. I have to start practicing. So there's that's not what I do because that's not who I want to be, So I think it's a big question, and I've gone off on like lots of different tangents, but I think I'm doing that on purpose because I really want to emphasize the fact that balance doesn't look the same for everyone. There's no right or wrong here. It's about what each person needs.
Exactly right. And every individual is a unique being. We know how much we could carry every day. And again, a different mindset, different upbringing. And as I've mentioned, Laws, you've been doing a lot of things, same as mine. And people would always think like, you've been doing a lot of things. How come you can still do it? But I believe in that if you are loving and enjoying what you're doing, you don't feel that you are actually overlapping something, because you know how to manage, and you know the core values, and you know where your priorities are, and you know exactly which one comes first and the next and all that. So that's why, as coaches like us, we don't create our own stress, but we know our capabilities and our capacity and what we can do each day. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can rewind this and watch this again. And that was really great, that what Laws has mentioned about don't go beyond limits. You know yourself better than anyone else. Again, we are all unique individuals. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Laws, about that. Amazing.
No
I should have an
worries.
effect here. Clap your hands. I could do that next time. Anyways, right. We were talking about self-care a while ago, and
Mm,
I just want to ask you quickly. And this was the common question when I was on campus last year before the break. What role our self-care play in maintaining a healthy work-life balance, and how can individuals incorporate this into their daily routine?
yeah. Look, it's a tricky one, because like, it's how much time do you have in the day? What does your day look like? Firstly, so for some of us we're night owls, and for others of us we're morning larks, and some of us are neither. So it's like, what does that look like for you? I mentioned
Okay.
sleep being sort of like a key pillar before, and I really think that, and I'm not the first person to say that. And I know Ariana Huffington a bunch of years ago really started pushing it and saying, we need sleep, we need sleep. So if you're eating into your sleep time for other self-care habits, that could be a problem too, right? I think like maybe a good place to start with that question is really around, well, what happens when we aren't taking care of ourselves? So instead of why do we need self-care, what happens if we don't have it? Because I think more of us are familiar with those symptoms. So what that starts to look like is we're more agitated, we're more moody, we feel more stressed, we feel overwhelmed. You might find, like, for some people that might look like things like you just start crying, you don't know why, or you're having panic attacks. Some of these things that we're talking about are quite serious things, and you might need to go and talk to a counselor or a psychologist about. But I want to call them out, because I think that sometimes we can be like, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I getting so emotional? Why am I getting so angry? Why am I getting so triggered? And I think, that they can be signs of other things, like the wounded inner child, which we touched on. And because of that, then we're not really taking care of ourselves. Now, in terms of then the role of self-care and how we do that, that's sort of starting to look at, I think first it's like triaging. What's the most urgent thing? Okay, it could be sleep. It could be I'm not eating very well. It could be I don't have any energy at all. I'm exhausted. I feel completely disconnected from the world around me. What does that look like in terms of those things? And then we can start to go, okay, let's take some action. So again, designing that and putting that into a daily routine, we don't want to try to do everything in one go. So something to do, like if someone comes in to like a new client coming in for a PT session, right? I know I keep going back to physical health, but I think it's all linked. I wouldn't sit there and say to someone, okay, we need to change your diet. We need to get you into the gym. We need to get you doing breath work. We need you to do stretching. We need to get you sleeping. Like, whoa, that's like way too much. So the first thing might be like, okay, let's see how you move. And for the next couple of weeks, I just want you to track what you eat. That's it. Let's get you moving a few times and let's track what you're eating. Okay, now a few weeks later, let's look at, oh, okay, so this is how you've been eating. All right, let's see if we can start adding some things in. Let's add some more nutrients. Let's add some more, good things for you. Let's get good things into you first. And then down the track, let's remove some of those habits that are no longer serving you. Maybe we can take out the packet of chips. Maybe we can take out, the donut at the end of the day, or whatever it is, right? So I think it's the same when we come to looking at self-care more holistically. I think it's the same thing. It's like, okay, what's the first thing we can do? How about you just start doing 1 minute of deep breathing once a day, right? There's actually research that shows even doing that has an impact on your brain, on your neurochemistry. There are some people where meditation is contraindicated if they've had like a really big trauma, and it can be triggering for that kind of stuff. But a lot of the time, something as simple as like breathing for 1 minute can be a great place to start. So we don't have to think about like, oh, I've got to start taking care of myself, I've got to start taking vitamins, I've got to start going for a run, I've got to like get all my homework done like straight away, I've got to be the best person at this, one thing at a time. So again, it does come down to sort of designing what that looks like. And I think, adding things first, it sounds strange because when we're talking about work-life balance, it can seem like the last thing you want to do is add something onto your plate first. But what I've found is generally if you add something and then you start subtracting, you start to build those habits, build the resilience, build the things like self-care that enables you then to go, okay, I can take some things away now that are no longer serving me, because they were there for a reason, doing things like using our vices, so watching heaps of TV, like, or drinking, or, recreational drug use, whatever it is, we're leaning on those things for a reason. There's a reason we're trying to meet our needs. They're just not very adaptive ways of meeting our needs. So adding in the good things first and then starting to take away the things that aren't serving us, I think is a really, really good approach. And hopefully that helps people in thinking about their daily routine.
I love those statements. Oh my God, I'll try and rewind this again. It's just beautiful. Like, start taking your self-power back, guys, and starting to more organize your day. What's the most important thing to you. Maybe there are a lot of priorities daily, on a daily basis, so you know exactly what to do. There's a process of elimination, and as what Laws has mentioned, ditch away or stay away from those things that doesn't serve you anymore. What's the point of having that and only creating your own stress? Once again, you are in control of yourself, and you don't want to mess around, and make sure that you have a positive outlook as well. You want a positive outcome. Okay, so thank you so much for that, Loss. It was beautiful. I don't want to end this conversation anymore. We can have like all day 24 hours podcast. Why not? So that was so good. That was so good. Love it, love it. And moving ahead as well. How can any individual, how can an individual navigate the challenges of work-life balance during the times of high stress? We're talking about possible self-sabotage, stress, during those times of high stress are significant, or any significant life events. How can any individual navigate the challenges of work-life balance, please? Thank you.
Yeah. So do you mean in terms of people starting to feel like depleted and like de-energized, like no longer engaged, that kind of those types of obstacles?
Yeah, they're so overwhelmed, they're feeling stress, and there's so much happening on my plate right now. I've got this, maybe it's kids, work, business, other things, etc., finances, a lot of things is going on. And obviously, these are all priorities. And how can these individuals navigate the challenges of a work-life balance so that they can continue to thrive and become more successful despite of what's happening around them?
Yeah, so I think, look, my go-to, and I know there's people that don't like this type of approach, but I'm just going to say it because I found it super effective, is just getting everything out of your head. So I'm a really big fan of the bullet journal method. I use like a digital bullet journal, one for work and one for home. I've done like quite a lot of study, so I'm used to fitting work and study in and trying to do everything, but I just found that the what creates overwhelm for me, and I think this is true for a lot of people, is that it's like we've got all these sort of half open tasks in our head, or open tasks in our head. So if you think about like, let's think about a computer screen, because that's something that we're all familiar with, and you've got like 20 tabs open on your Chrome. I'm someone who does that, or Google Chrome or Safari, whatever you use.
Me too.
You've got all these different tabs open, but each tab then also has an active thing that you're thinking about. So it's not just like, oh, I've got a tab sitting there that I don't need to look at anymore. It's like, task, 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 task. That's what can happen in our brain. So we can end up being like, I've got to think about like, we just went through Christmas. So I feel like this is a relevant thing. Okay. So whether it's Christmas or New Year's or whatever holiday you celebrate, a lot of people around this time of year, they're usually getting together with family, right? So it could be, okay, like I'm traveling back home. I've got to organize all of this. I've got to finish my studies for the trimester. I've got to make sure I tell work about this. And we end up with like this stack of I've got to buy presents for these people or whatever it is, right? I have to cook these meals. We suddenly have like all of these tasks. And now if they're all in our head, what can happen is we just end up like circling back around them. And if they're all active at the same time, we're just circling. I've got to do this. 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 Finish my list, go back to the start because I don't want to forget. I've got to do this, got to do this, got to do this. So for me, I'm like, number one thing, if you're feeling overwhelmed, write it all down. Write everything down and then start looking at, okay, when can I do these things? I can't do 20 things in one day. I can do 3, 4, maximum 6, right? These are the 6 things I need to do. What order am I going to do them in? What other things what commitments do I have today? There's a really good 1-minute video if you look up bullet journaling that will take you through the sort of technique, but I just have found it's so helpful because once it's written down, once you're, okay, I don't have to worry about that because I'm doing that Thursday, I'm doing that Friday. Today I have to do these 3 things. All right, I just go and do these 3 things. We move from being in our heads worried about it to taking action. I'm a recovering perfectionist and a recovering procrastinator, and that's the thing that I've found is super, super helpful. So I know that's only one sort of tip, but I think it's a really important one is if you have this sense of there's so much going on in my head and I can't remember it all, get it out of your head. There's a really, really great book. What's it called now? The Organized Mind by Daniel Levitin. And he talks about we've got these 2 modes of operating for our brain. So we have the executive mode, and the executive mode is like, bang, 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 I'm going to do all these tasks. And the other one is sort of like the mind wandering mode, which is much more creative. It's a part of our brain that sort of switches on, or our mind switches on when we're having a shower or we're walking around. We suddenly remember something, or we make a connection. We can solve a problem that we couldn't solve before when we're in this sort of more task-oriented mode. And I think what bullet journaling or another style of that, it can be, any sort of task organization process, is it actually clears our brain out so that we do have that mind-wandering mode available to us again, which makes it easier to solve problems or, work smarter, not harder, do all of those things that are quite hard to do when we're just sort of in I've got to get all of these tasks on and I have to think about it because I don't want to forget it.
I love that. I love that bullet points on jotting what are the things that you want to do. And then you can do the process of elimination if you can. You can, pause. Again, this is part of the self-care, and you know exactly what matters for you for the day on a daily basis. Some of them can be done the next day anyways, right? So thank you so much, Laws. You are amazing. My God, I would love to watch the recorded after this because, you've given so much wisdom, knowledge, strategy, skills, tips, everything. Laws, thank you so much for today. You have done you have created an impact to everyone today all over the world who's going to be watching this recorded in the future. Thank you so much. And this is just the beginning of our podcast. We should have another collab next time. Okay, Lois, promise.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah?
Sounds like fun.
It's so good that you have scheduled it today, and it's really perfect timing. And a lot of people are really need to listen to this because some of them are starting next week for their work, for their maybe school or anything that they're whatever other commitments they have at this time. You have created a huge impact to each one of them. Thank you so much. Salute to you. All right, beautiful, and we'll have more to come, more podcasts. So this is Success blueprint episode 2, ladies and gentlemen, trying to juggle your work-life balance, your personal and professional responsibilities. Indeed, life is full of ups and downs, but with the right mindset, as I've mentioned before, and tools, you can overcome any obstacles. And as what Laws has mentioned a while ago, start with your self-care, know your priorities, and ask yourself, what is the most important thing for me today, so that you can move forward and you know exactly what is your priority today, and the rest can be done the next day. So that's very good. It's all about preventing your self-sabotaging and preventing from yourselves creating your own stress, so that you're always happy every day, and of course stay motivated on your path to success. So don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, unlock your full potential and achieve greatness. And always remember, stay amplified and stay motivated, because you have the power to create the life that you desire. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone. Lovely day. And see you again next time for our next episode. Thanks, Laws. See you,
No worries,
everyone.
Lee. See you everyone.
Bye.
Bye.